Okay, so welcome to chapter 12, and it's all about managing networking in Redhat Enterprise Linux. So in this case, we're still having a continuation from the previous chapter, that is from the previous tutorial, that is chapter 10. And here we have, chapter 11, and here we are at chapter 12, and we are concentrating on understanding the management of network in Linux operating system. So when we talk about managing networking in Linux operating system, we have to start from a more lower level as we advance to a more complex area. So we must, first of all, start from understanding some basic concepts of networking, and especially some abbreviations or some new keywords that are being introduced in the networking part. So in this case, we need to describe or describing networking concepts. So what are these concepts? And I know majority of us, when it comes to networking or when it comes to a term, network, we are having some other related concepts or some other related keywords probably we've had before. So those are things that we need to highlight. For example, we can talk about IP address or IP address. What is an IP address? And then what are the different versions that are available when it comes to those versions. And in this case, we have, for example, IP version 4, IP version 6, what is the differences? So we will talk about them. And so in general term, we want to describe or introduce ourselves into some few concepts, some few keywords in the networking. Now, there's some bit of questions here that I feel it okay, or I saw it a need for us to actually get to understand before before we start the practical part on how to edit the network part, or how the network configuration files, how to use the command line as far as configuring network is concerned. So these are some of the questions that that can actually bring us to this point. So the first question is about what are gateway in computer networks? First of all, when it comes to computer networks, or when it comes to networking as far as computers is concerned, we are talking about a collection of computers or a collection of devices under a network or connected over the network. So when we have that, we can call it computer networking because the computers are actually connected over a network. So you can have a computer, let's say computer A relating to computer B, or sharing files, or files are being shared from computer A to computer B to computer D to computer C. And we are actually sharing some resources, or these computers are sharing resources through what? Through a network. So when you let's say you get to computer networks or try to understand the computer networks, you will also realize that we have different types of computer networks. And we can talk about, for example, the bus network. You can talk about, let's say, the network. So we have different platforms. But in this case, we are not concentrating on trying to define the computer networks, trying to mention different types of network. We want to understand the networking part in what? In Linux operating system. How do we configure, or how do we use a network in Linux operating system? Now, we have a term such as gateway. What is a gateway? We have a term such as an IP address. What is an IP address? We have a term such as DNS. What is a DNS? So the first question is about what are gateway in computer networks? So a gateway is a network node used in telecommunications that connects two networks with different transmission protocols together. Now, remember, we have like types of networks. One, we have like the local area network. We have like the wide area network. we have like the campus area network, we have like metropolitan area network. So all these are what types of networks. So when we have, let's say, a node, and a node is what? A node is a name given to a computer within a network. So when you have 3 computers connected over the network, then one of the computers is actually called what? A node. That is another name. So a gateway here is a network node used in telecommunications that connects 2 networks with different transmission protocols together. Gateways serve as an entry and exit point for a network, as all data must pass through or communicate with the gateway prior to being routed. So here you should have a gateway for you to share some resources, or for you to have a communication between nodes, or between one network to another. Now, that is about what? A gateway. Another question is that, what is an IP address and why is it used? So an IP address is assigned to your device by your internet service provider. We always have something called the ISP. So for that particular IP address, the internet protocol address, it must come from the internet service provider. For this case, if you're talking about, if your service provider or your internet service provider is Safaricom, then the IP address must always come from Safaricom. If it is fiber or any other internet service provider, then the IP address must come directly from them. So an IP address is assigned to your device by your internet service provider, like your cable, telephone, wireless, or carrier company, and is a requirement to use the internet. So the internet must always be there. The internet must always be there. So IP addresses are how computers on the internet recognize one another to send websites or services back and forth. IP addresses are how computers on the internet recognize one another to send websites or services back and forth. Now, in this case, if I can give an example, like an IP address attached to a computer, because each computer must have what? An IP address. Let's assume that I have 3 computers. For these 3 computers to communicate, I must have 3 IP addresses attached to these computers. Now, these IP addresses is actually a unique identifier to that particular computer. So you'll find that these IP addresses are not equal, especially the last value, because it's actually have around 4 values. So you'll find that the last value will always tell more about the integer or the value attached to that particular computer, and it's a unique value. So no 2 computers or no computers can share what, or an IP address cannot be shared between 2 computers. So each computer must have its own what, its own IP address, or each node must have its own IP address. Now, what is a router used for in networking? So a router receives and sends data or data on computer networks. So it's actually the work of a router. So for you to send information, or for you to send some files, or for you to have some communication in terms of resource sharing between one computer and another, then the router must always be there. So the router also must be configured. There should be some configuration on the router to ensure that it receives and sends data on computer networks. So you see, for example, now, when it comes to the first one, is actually the gateway. Gateway actually connects 2 networks just for connectivity. But the router now is the one that receives what? Receives and sends data on a computer network. Now, routers are sometimes confused with network hubs, modems, or network switches. However, routers can combine the functions of these components and connect with these devices to improve internet access or help create business networks. Again, however, routers can combine the functions of these components and connect with these devices to improve internet access or help create business networks. So we are actually talking about what? A router. So router receives and sends data on computer networks. Now, another term that you could find yourself in is actually the DNS. What is the DNS? Now, first of all, it's an abbreviation. So it stands for what? It stands for Domain Name Service, or it stands for Domain Name System. So DNS translates domain names to IP addresses so that browsers can load internet resources. Now, each device connected to the internet has a unique IP address, which other machines use to find the device. DNS servers eliminate the need for humans to memorize IP addresses such as 192.168. You see, so instead of us to memorize, it's actually the work of the DNS servers to understand or to know the IP address. For example, if you're typing, let's say you want to search for a specific website, so you have the URL to that website. Already we have an IP address attached to that. So it's actually the work of the DNS servers to take note of what? To take note of all their IP addresses. By doing what? By translating the domain names now to what? To IP addresses. So if you're looking for YouTube, let's say you want to open a YouTube, we always type the word youtube.com, but behind it, we have a what? We have an IP address, or an IP address to that particular part. So this is about what is the DNS. And then what is IP? IP4. So what is an IP version 4 address? IP4 stands for Internet Protocol version 4. It stands for Internet Protocol version 4. It is the underlying technology that makes it possible for us to connect our devices to the website or to the web. Whenever a device accesses the internet, it is assigned a unique numerical IP addresses such as 99.48.227.227. And when you come to, let's say, where I am currently, you'll find that our IP addresses, or my IP addresses connected to my machine, is around 192.168.2, then a certain number. IP version 4 is the most widely used version of the Internet Protocol. It defines IP addresses in a 32-bit format, which looks like 123.123. So it's actually a 2-bit format. Each 3-digit section can include a number from 0 to 255. So it means that the maximum digit that can each section can have is 255. So it cannot go beyond 255, which means the total number of IP version 4 addresses available is 4,294,967,296. That is around 4,294,000. It's not even about like 4,294,968,7, and then 296. So we have those figures there. So the concept here is just for you to know what is IP version 4. Is it something that was there before? Is it something that is still active? Is it something that is massively, or something that is being used massively? So IP version 4, as long as you're still using the local area network by use of cables, area network or the Ethernet, then you are attached to what? IP version 4. Then the types of addresses in IP version 4. So I'm just trying for us to have a good understanding, just to have this particular picture, that the types of addresses in IP version 4, the network range. Bullet 1, a particular IP version 4 network will have a range of addresses to be used in that network. Example, the network 172.20.23.0/24 will have the address range from what? 172.20.23.0 up to what? 172.20.23.255. Now, if you can look at the last value, 0, and the last, which is 255, you can see that you can have a range of what? A range of addresses. So if you want even 255 addresses, you can still achieve that because you have that range between 255 and what? And 0. Now, bullet 2, this range of addresses can be divided into 3 types. One, we have the network address, we have the broadcast address, and then we have the host address. The network address, the broadcast address, and the host address. Now, the host addresses are the ones assigned to the individual hosts. That means the last file, whether it is 0 or 255, that is what? A host address. Then 172.20.23, that will share now between the network address and the broadcast address. So when you immerse yourself so much on the networking part, just to understand and read more, you will be in a position to understand now what do we mean by the network address, broadcast address, and the host address. But here we are concentrating on the host address because that is attached to, is actually an address that is assigned to the individual host. That is just an example of what? An IPv4 IP address. Then come another part. So IPv4 came earlier before even IPv6. So what is IPv6 address? IPv6 still stands for Internet Protocol version 6. So it has now shifted from version 4 to version 6. It is actually the 6th revision to the Internet Protocol and the successor to IPv4. So it means that IPv6, it came, or IPv6 is actually here to replace what? IPv4. It functions similarly to IPv4 in that it provides the unique IP addresses necessary for internet-enabled devices to communicate. Now, Internet Protocol version 6 is a network layer protocol that allows communication and data transfers to take place over the network. That is the actual point about what? About IPv6. So still we have what? It's a protocol that allows communication and data transfers to take place over the internet. So IPv6 came into existence in 1998 with the sole purpose of taking over and replace the IPv4 protocol one day. So it is actually in the process of replacing the IP version 4. That is IPv6. That is IPv6. Now, and this is the image. This is how it is, the IPv6 address format. So you'll find that we have IPv6. This is how it is. So we have like 2001, ODB 8, 000, 000, 000. And this is how it is. You see, it's actually different from what? It is different from IPv4. Even the way it is written, it's actually different. So I will try probably to display and see whether we have. So if you want more about the IPv4 6 address, you can actually, you can dig deeply, probably get a good video and you'll do that. So I will also try as much as possible to record something on IP. What's the differences between IPv4 and IPv6? So just to know that we have a new IP or internet protocol, which is version 6, and it has come to replace what? IPv4. So when it comes to the replacement part, IPv4 is still in use. It has not been replaced, but there's a way that a process of replacing it. Now, describing network interface names. Describing network interface names. Now, when it comes to describing network interface names, we are talking about, remember here we are talking from the Ethernet point of view. That is the LAN, the local area network, because here we are dealing with what? The IP addresses. So when it comes to IP addresses, and for this case, if I can just open my Linux operating system, I have this user, you'll find out that we have different ways, because one, you need to probably try. And first of all, we need to understand the network concepts. That is, of course, something that I've actually tried to mention some of the keywords in that perspective. And then again, we need also to know what are some of the configuration files attached to the network, and how do we check, let's say, for example, the network interface names, or how do we come up with the network interface names? Now, for the network interface names or the device names, the network device names, these are names that we normally come up with. These are names that we normally come up with, and we can modify them as much as we want. So if I'm not interested with, let's say, a name, if the network, my network interface name is Sammy, if I'm not interested with that, I can change it to something like Mark, or I can change to something else. But in this case, because we are dealing with the Ethernet, we're using the Ethernet cable. So automatically this qualifies that the type of network is what? The LAN, or the local area network. So this is what we call LAN. So here we have the Ethernet cable, using Ethernet cable. So for the names, or the network and interface names, we normally try as much as possible to assign something similar to Ethernet. So for example, I can have ENS 160. I can have ENS 33. I can have ENS 77, and so on. These are not like names that we should like understand or try to cram so that we will be using. No, these are just random names. You can decide even that you want ENS 1000, ENS, or you can have a different name, like, let's say, like the name Sammy. But the problem with, let's say, giving Sammy, and the advantage of using EN is that somebody will actually recognize these names fast, that it will actually recognize them as well as Ethernet network interface names. So we have ENS 160, which is attached to a specific IP address, ENS 33 attached to a specific address, ENS 77 attached to a specific address. So for my case, we have what? We have these devices. Now, so the question is, how do we do what? The question is about what? Describing network interface name. So the question is also about identification of the network interface names. Now, when it comes to the networks, we need, or for us to find these Ethernet names, or the network interface names, we need first of all to describe. It's like we're trying to find the IP addresses attached to our machines. So how do you check the IP address in Linux operating system, or Red Hat operating system for this case? So I will just use what? If configuration file. I know in Windows operating system, if you are trying to find the IP address attached to your computer using the command based or the CMD, you'll always use the IP. So IP config. So this one is basically used in Windows operating system as far as you're interacting with the CMD. And the other one is about if config. So if I press enter to this, you'll find that I have what? I have all this information. And what captures our mind, or what captures our eyes, is what? Is ENS 160. Is ENS 160. Now, with this particular type of network interface name, this one is a network interface name. So in my case, I have an active network interface name called ENS 160. That is active. So again, this shows me that I am also in a position to identify what? To identify the IP address. So what is the IP address? My IP address is this: 192.168.2.162. And then you can also see that we have like the net mask 255.255.250. broadcast 192.168.255. Now, we talked about the host. We have like, in an IP address, we have like 3 areas. One, we have the network addresses, we have the broadcast addresses, and then we have the host addresses. And the host addresses is the one assigned to what? To the individual host, such as my computer or my operating system. So this is what? This is the host. This is the host address, 162. So in case that you have your laptop and we are actually under the same network, we should not actually, or we are not required to share the last digit, which is 162. So mine could be 162, yours could be 163 or 164. So in general, this is the number or the value attached or assigned to your specific what? To your specific host machine. So this is how you identify. Now, by default, you'll find that you have like this one called the low. You'll also find that you have the fibro. And if at all you have a wireless, you can still do what? You can still have it start with the WLAN. So this is how you do what? This is how you, you can use this command to view 2 things. One, you probably are interested with understanding or trying to find out what is the IP addresses attached to my computer. And then again, the interface or the network interface name assigned to that particular IP address. So ENS 160 is equals to 192.168.2.162. So it is actually linked to that. Now, so that is how you can do that. Again, you can use what? IP for Internet Protocol, and then you can say address, that is ADDR, or even in full, you see, IP address. It's like you're asking a question to the operating system. And remember, you're actually typing through the terminal. So it's actually the shell that will try to execute your request. So IP address or IP address is actually the same thing. If I press enter, this one now gives us in a more detailed way. You can still see that here we have what? ENS 160. We still have ENS 160. And then the IP address is what? The same 162. The same 162. So this one is like you're trying to view in a more broader way. Those things that were not displayed with if config command is now going to be displayed in a more detailed manner using the IP address. So using this and using that is actually the same thing. So that is one way. But again, you can use different avenues. You can use different avenues to arrive at that answer. What is my IP address? You have options. It's not that we are only required to be assigned or attached to one thing. Now, again, we have the issue of testing the network. You see, we can test the network using an IP address. You see, if you have, let's say, 2, 3 computers and you want to connect them or link them together, say that there's a communication in between them, you have to test whether there's where you have a breakthrough or where there's a possibility of communication. So we have this particular command called ping. And remember, when it comes to Linux commands, you can always use what? You can always seek some help or try to understand the command. For example, you can say you want to understand about the command. So you have to check the manual. So we start with the word man, which stands for manual, and then followed by the command. If you press enter, it will explain or it will try to do what? To break it down. So this is what? This is how you can seek help. But again, we also have what? We also have this ping space hyphen help. If you press enter, this one is still okay, and this one is not working here. Ping, okay, let's say info, ping, yes. We also have like info. You can start with info, then say ping. So you can still find this. So the name is ping. What is ping? It's used to send ICMP echo request to network hosts. And then ping uses something called the ICMP protocols mandatory, echo request, datagram, and so many information. Now, that is how. So if I want to test, for example, I need to identify my my IP address. So it is 192.168.122.1. Not even this one. This one is on a fibro. So we're interested at this point, 192.168.2.162. Now, having known that, you can now test by, for example, I can give 192.168.2.162, press enter. Now, you can see that my network or I'm actually getting a breakthrough. So it means that the IP address is actually working. So if I'm to link up with another computer or try to communicate with another computer or try to share some files with another computer, I can still work out because one, my IP address is actually valid or is actually up and running. So I will show you how do we start this network or how do we enable that this network device so that it works, or this particular IP addresses by using the interface name. And again, how do we stop? So there's a lot of things that we're going to go through as far as network is concerned. Now, when it comes to the configuration of network or modification of network or changing a network, we must work with a certain utilities. So we have like utilities. Now, these utilities are in form of commands. And once you use that utility, it can give you, or it can actually open so many avenues on how you can modify or do something to a network. And in this case, we are only attached to what? To the Linux operating system. So what happens is we have this command called, we have like NMCLI. NMCLI stands for what? It stands for network manager. Let's say command line interface. That is what? That is the NMCLI. So this one is a what? This one is a command based. So if you want to do some configurations of your network via the terminal, then you are required to use what? NMCLI. So NMCLI is more of what? Is more of command based. But now the next two others, these are now what? They are more of graphical user interface. It's only that you need this command to trigger the interface and then you use. So another one is something called NMTUI. So NMTUI stands for network manager. Okay, probably can have like terminal user interface. So user interface. So network manager terminal user interface. But you can still find out more about NMTUI. What does it stand for? And also NMCLI, what does it stand for? Probably I may be missing something or I'm getting everything, that's okay. But also you on your site, just try and find out what is NMCLI and also what is NMTUI. But still we can find out. Let me just open my browser so that we can see what they are. But meanwhile, the that part here is we have NM connection editor. So this one is a what? This one is the that Linux command. So here we have like three. We have NMCLI, which you can use. We have NMTUI, which you can also use. And we have NM connection editor. Now, all these commands are basically used to do what? To manage the network, to manage the networks. Now, in this case, we are talking about NMTUI. Let's say, what does NMTUI stands for? Yeah, so it's not, yeah, you see, like we're talking about not terminal. I think that was a mistake I did. It's about text, not terminal. It's about text. So that is the reason why I ask you to go and check it. You see, sometimes we may be in a position to use the command so heavily. We are experts in using that command. But when it comes to the definition of it, you find yourself probably confusing one or two things. So NMTUI stands for Network Manager Text User Interface. Now for the NMCLI again, NMCLI, let's see, NMCLI, this one is the network command, the network manager command line interface. So for this case, I think we are in the correct point. So what happens now is that when it comes to this, we have 3 commands for managing the network. Now, this does not mean that you'll be required to use all of them. No. But if you're interested in using one, let's say you find one that is more easy for you, you can go with that because it's actually the same thing. So if you are having a passion of managing the network in a command-based way or using commands, then you can work with NMCLI. If you want more of graphical, then you can work with either NMTUI or NM Connection Editor. So for the NMCLI, let me just show you. For the NMCLI, NMTUI, you just type the command the way it is, NMTUI. Press enter, and it will give you what? It will give you this graphical part. So what is being opened here, or what is being displayed is actually like a network manager text user interface. And then the first option is that please select an option. Do you want to edit a connection? And the connection here is all about what? It's like the network interface name, for example, the ENS 160, which I had actually shown you. So that is a connection. Do you want to edit that? Do you want to activate that? Do you want to set system host name? So I'll show you how to set the host name. So if you want to edit, you can just press enter. And you can see that we have the Ethernet, which is ENS 160. If you want to add, edit, delete, it's up to you. So what you can do is you can just, and we always navigate NMTUI or trying navigating through NMTUI. It's all about using the up, down arrow keys. So if you want to come back, you can come back. If you want to activate a connection, you can still activate. So you can see for the ENS 160, it's actually called what? A wired. If I want to deactivate, I can deactivate that, and I'll show you what it is. Then if you want to set a system host name, then this is the host name. This is the host name, and I'll show you how we can do that using even NMCLI. So it is more easy for you to use the graphical way than what? Than the command-based way. That is by using NMCLI. But all of them, you will arrive at the same answer. So I don't want that. Okay, so unable to set host name. Okay, insufficient privileges. Yeah, there's a reason to that because we are not linked up as root. That is NMTUI. The second one is about NM Connection Editor. NM Connection Editor. If you press enter, it will still pop up a window. But now this window, you will not actually navigate using the up, down arrow keys, but with that, you can now manually use also the arrow or the cursor, because you have to use your mouse now. If you want to add, you can click that and it will come up. And then if you come to Ethernet, that is the choosing the type, you'll see a lot. So here we are trying to talk about what? The Ethernet. So this one is more of the network, more of graphical user interface. So if you want to add an Ethernet, you can always add and then choose a connection type. And then from that, you can say create. So I don't want to create, but we will come into that. So all these are very important. Using NMTUI, using NM Connection Editor, you find one that is your most suitable. If you are passionate with using NMTUI, just go with that. If you're passionate with using NM Connection Editor, just go with that. If you're passionate with going with the NMCLI, just go with that. But our project or how I work here, we're going to use probably NMCLI. NMCLI now in this case is a what? Is a command based. So after typing NMCLI, let me just try press enter. If I press enter, it's not going to give me like or give a pop-up window. This one is specifically for what? Commands. So it's a command by itself. But how you add more options or more arguments to this command, that is how you can get different results based on your what? Interest. So with that said, we will be able now to use what? NMCLI. So when it comes to NMCLI, we have different ways of using it. For example, we can have NMCLI and then we can say connection. That means I want to see all the available connections. So NMCLI connection show, that is command. That is the first what? Command. And this type of command actually gives you all the connected, whether connected and connected what, whether up or, whether running or not running, whether active or inactive connections, it will display everything on board. So if I press enter, you can see that here we have only, two connections are being displayed here. We have one for the Ethernet and we also have one for the bridge. So for the Ethernet, that is the one we are concentrating on. ENS 160, it is the interface or the network interface name. And then the device again is ENS 160. So NMCLI connection show. Now, what happens is, you see, for this particular type of network, for example, if you look at your top, is it top right? Top right, you can see that we have something like an hierarchy. Now, this one is what? This one is a proof that the network is available. I can actually access the internet the way I want because the network is what? The network is available. The network is available. So what happens is, when you want to, let's say, deactivate the network, we have another command for deactivating. This time around, my network is active. And in this case, let me just try and find out, can we be in a position to deactivate using an NMTUI? Deactivating means that we are trying to get rid of the device name. Now, let me use NMTUI. And using NMTUI again, we can have different ways. Let's say NMTUI edit, you see? If you press enter, it will open what? The editor, which is actually the same thing. Now with this, you can say you want either to add, you want to do what, but you can see that we have a lot of info here. So I don't want to talk about this for now. Let me quit. I want something else here. Now let me say NMCLI. Okay, let me just use NMCLI. So we have NMCLI connection and then use down and then ENS 160. NMCLI connection down and then ENS 160. But again, you can use the shortest. You see, for connection, you can use CON. You are allowed to use CON alone. Now here it means what? I am bringing down the network. I'm trying to deactivate. This is the way you deactivate a network. So if I press enter, it will tell me what? Connection ENS 160 successfully done what? Deactivated. Now let me repeat this command, whether we are in a position to see this device. Now you can see that the device name is no longer there. And look at the top right. Do we still have the hierarchy? Because that is a proof that the network is up and running. So we do not have what? We do not have that proof. So it means now that the network is not up and running. If you want to browse even to the internet or browse, open a Chrome or Mozilla, you will not be in a position to use the internet because the internet is unavailable. Why? It has been switched. So how do I bring it up? To bring it up, it's only the opposite of bringing it down. So instead of down, just bring it up. So I will press enter. And again, I am getting what? Connection successfully activated. Initially, it was successfully deactivated. This time around, it is successfully activated. Successfully activated. Now, if I come back and check the status, NMCLI connection show, now you can see what? The ENS 160 has come back, and even the icon or the hierarchical symbol has come up. So it means that now the internet is available. So this is how you can check the status of the internet or the network interface or the internet via a device name. This is how you can shut it down. This is how you can bring it up. So those are different ways of how you can do it. You can access that. And then we have, if you want now to control, that is by using what? That is by using NMCLI. But we also have, if you remember the service, you see everything that runs in Linux operating system runs as a service. The network is a service. And to control the network, the entire network now, in general, we need to use what? We have a service called network manager. And if you want to control this particular service or any service in Linux operating system, just as I had talked about in the previous video, you have to use what? systemctl. So systemctl status, and then you can say network manager. Systemctl network manager. If you stop this, then it means that the network, or you will not be in a position to use the network within your system. So if I check the status, you can see that the status is active and running. Active and running. So it means that the device is ready for any network. So this is what? This is a service that should be controlled. If you want to stop it, you can stop it. If you want to restart, to enable it, to disable it, you can disable all these, this particular service called the network manager. So I think we'll do something like a practical so that we can also arrive at that. Now, so apart from this NMCLI connection show, you can again use this NMCLI like general and then say status. So we have different ways. So this one will only give you what? Different ways. What is the state? Connected. Connectivity full. Wi-Fi enabled, and then you can see this. Now let me try this. Let me bring it down. I want to bring it down. And then let me bring back the general status. Now you can see that something has changed. In this particular line, something has changed. What? The connectivity is limited. But the connectivity here is what? Is full. Connectivity is limited. Connected, local only. So this does not give you a guarantee that there's a network, but we're talking about the connectivity status, which is limited. Once the device is brought up, let's say it's actually up and running, up, press enter. Yes, successfully. And this time around, if I go back and say NMCLI general status, it will give me that the connection is connected, the state is connected, connectivity is full, and then we have these others. Now, again, apart from using this, let's say, because I'm trying to disconnect, if you want to disconnect the network via ENS 160, you can still use what? Down. But there's also another way of doing that. You see, when we use ENS 160, we are talking about what? We're talking about the name. But if you want to use the device to deactivate, you can still do that. So you can say NMCLI device, and then say disconnect, and then ENS 160, which is the same as what? It is equals to NMCLI connection down. Okay, so this one I'm typing down, then ENS 160. It's actually the same thing. It's actually the same thing. So we always have different ways of arriving at the same answer. So if I use the first, let's say this, and press enter, you can see device ENS 160 successfully disconnected. If I come to the status, NMCLI connection show, you can see that it is deactivated. And then if you can also bring it back by using the same way, you can say NMCLI device connect, press enter, and it is successfully activated. And when it comes to the status, now you can see that it is there. So we can use different ways. You can use the connection, or you can use the device name. Now, this one is not a big deal because we already have the device name, or we already have the network attached, with the network interface name. The only problem now, or the more challenging part for us to also understand, is how do we come up, or it's actually like a question you're posing to yourself. How did Sami came up with that? Or how do we come up with a new network interface name? Now, when it comes to coming up with a network interface name, there are a lot of things that you should get involved. One is that you must use, for example, we need to identify the gateway, we need to identify the DNS, we need to identify a lot of things. Now, for example, we have an IP address attached to Google, because if you want to use the Chrome, for example, you can say www.google.com. If you press enter, you can see that we have a breakthrough. We have a breakthrough to what? To Google. Again, if I can use the IP address attached to that is 8.8.8.8. You see, I can still get the what? So this is not an IP address. It's going to call what? A domain name service, or a DNS. So DNS means what? We have the mapping of domain names to IP addresses. So the IP address for Google.com is 8.8.8.8, which is equal, or which is mapped with the domain name www.google.com. So this is how what? This is how now the DNS works. So you typed www.google.com, and directly it's being mapped into its corresponding IP address, which is 8.8.8.8. So how do we come up with a new device, or how do you create a new device? Before that, if you go to network settings, as far as okay, let me see. As far as Redhat Linux is concerned, so you go to that wired connected, wired settings. So this one, you can navigate it graphically. You can navigate through this graphically. And you can see that we have this. So if you come to this wired and click there, it will pop up a window, and this will tell you a lot of things. It will tell you about the DNS, the route, the hardware address, the IP. So this one is the IP address attached to my computer. You can talk about the identity, the IP version 4, the IP version 6, the security. So we have a lot of things to also understand. But I want to bring you, or to lay down some of the basics, some of the basic things that you should in a position to understand. Now, how do we come up with a what? How do we come up with a new network interface name? And remember, whenever you're using or having a new network interface name, let's say initially we had ENS 160. Probably you want to come up with ENS 170, or you want to come up with ENS 180. First of all, for this, you should actually have extra what? You should have like an extra IP address, because the IP address should come directly from the ISP, which is assigned to that particular interface. So if you look at 160, it is connected to what? 192.168.2.162. If I want 170 to work, then I should also have an IP address to attach to it. Let's say 168.2.1.163. Now, for this case, I don't know 163. It is actually active and it's being used somewhere. So I will also try to see whether we can work with that. But if you have an IP address or you've been assigned an IP address by your SP, then this is how you can map that or connect that with the network interface name. So that is how it is. So how do we come up with DNS 170? So first of all, you can use NMCLI and then say connection, say hard, type what? So what is the type? It is an Ethernet. And then what is the connection name? So the connection name for this case, we can say it is what? ENS, let's say 170. And then with this, we can actually execute from that perspective. But here we need again to have the if name. And then we repeat what? So if name will be, it's actually the same with the con name. So you can say ENS 170. Then from there, you can say you want to attach an IP address. You can say you want to attach an IP address. So you can say IP version 4 address, you see, IP version 4.address. And then you can say 192.168.2.163. So I'm assuming that we have an IP address 163. So we will see whether it will go through. And then from that point, we have something again called the gateway. So the gateway again will take in almost the same one, the same IP address, but this time round, it's being rounded off. The last value is being rounded off, let's say to 0, or we can have it to 1. Now, for this case, if I press enter, you can see that the connection ENS 170 has been successfully added. But now the IP address attached to that is what? 192.168.2.163. The last value is what is being attached to that. Now let's prove whether we've actually come up with that. So NMCLI connection, sure, press enter. Now you can see that we have what? We have ENS 160 and we have ENS 170. We have ENS 160 and we have ENS 170. Now, is it active? The question is it active or not active? So it's not actually active because the device name is not available. But now let's prove whether you can bring it up. So connection, app ENS, let's say 170. So if you press enter, you can see that we have a lot of connection errors, that the connection activation failed, no suitable device found for this connection. Device ENS 160 not available because profile is not compatible with device, mismatching interface name. So there's a lot of information. So, but remember our IP address is a random what? Is a random IP address. Is a random IP address. So with that, that is not going to help us, especially for in terms of connection, in terms of using that interface network name, but at least we've actually seen how to come up with a what? How to come up with an interface or a network interface name or the device name for that matter. So as long as you have a valid IP address assigned to you, then you can actually use that. So you only replace the IP address just give you and use what? And use the valid one. Now, the question is, how do we delete them? Or how do I delete the ENS 170? So to delete is just short, you can just say NMCLI connection, delete, and then ENS 170. Press enter, it will tell you successfully deleted. So when you come back and try to check, now it is no longer there. It is no longer there. So there's a lot of information. There's a lot of information that you want. And for this case, let me just repeat the same thing. I want to show you how you can modify. So let me just repeat the same concept. So I am assuming that we have a connection show. I'm assuming that I have an ENS 170, which is active. So I have ENS 170. We are assuming that this is actually an active network interface name or a network device. Now, how do we rename? Because we can always try to modify the name. We can always try to modify the name. And for this case, we can also use what? Let's use the ENS 160 for my case. Yes, since we have the active, let me have delete ENS 170. Okay, let's see that you can see that the name ENS 160 is equal to the name of the device, which is okay. But what happens in a scenario where you want to change the name ENS 160? What happens to that scenario? Now, for you to do that, because the device is already in place, you can do what? You can modify. You can try to modify the network. So modification means what? You're trying to change something in an already existing what device. So here you can say NMCLI connection and then say modify. You see, NMCLI connection modify and then say what? You can say modify what? Modify the name, which is what? Which is, let's say ENS 160 to what? Then say connection.id, connection.id to what? Then you can say something like, let's say to Sami. But in this case, it's better we have it, let's say to ENS 300. So you want to change that name from ENS 160 to ENS 300. So if you want to change that, this is how you do it. So if I press enter, you can see that no error whatsoever. But when it comes to NMCLI connection show, you can see that the name of the device has been changed from ENS 160 to ENS 300 to the ENS 300. Now let's see whether it is working. So when I come back here and say, let me try and see whether I can bring it down. Then ENS 300. You see, connection successfully activated. Oh, already it was okay. I wanted to bring it down. Yeah, successfully deactivated. Now, when it comes to NMCLI connection show, you can see it is not there. So if I bring it up and then say NMCLI connection show, now you can see it is there. So how we change the name, how we change the name of the device, this is the command, NMCLI connection modify ENS 160 connection.id ENS 300. So we are changing ENS 160 to ENS 300. It's more like renaming that. So that is what, that is the simplest you can go. But if you want, let's say you want to add, and because we can actually add a device, but we can still remodify it using NMCLI connection modify. But what happens if you want to bring it all at once? So this is what, this is the command. You can say NMCLI connection. Let's say I want to modify. Of course, I'm bringing it back. Let me bring it back. Okay, let me just have this. Okay, let me take it back. Connection, and then say modify. Let's say ENS 300 now. Then connection ID, then ENS 160. So I'm taking it back to its original name. So NMCLI connection, show. Yeah, you can see it's 160, ENS 160, ENS 160. Now, on this part, let me see that, let's say that we need to modify an existing, not even an existing, but a new device. So in this case, it means that I have to come up with a new device. So let me say connection add, and then say adding what? Ethernet. Okay, type Ethernet, and then we say like coname. We have ENS33. If name, you have ENS, let's say that's 3. And then you can just press that. Okay, so you can see that connection ENS successfully added. But the problem here is that the device is not even connected to any IP address or assigned to any IP addresses. It's not even assigned to any gateway, any DNS. So if you want to ensure that everything is on board now, you can say NMCLI connection modify ENS 33 and then say IP version 4.address. So I'm going to give a random address. Let's say 192.168.2.200 or 100, and then IP version 4. You see gateway. So we need also to provide the gateway. So 192.168.2.0 or .1, that case, and then IP version 4 again, DNS. And in this case, we are giving the DNS for .8. That is for the Google. And then from there, we can say we want it to be started automatic. So we can say version 4. The method, there are two methods, is manual, and then the connection should be started automatically. That means whenever you made a connection, there should be like an auto connect. So the auto connect is yes. So this is actually like the best way you can do that. So if I press enter, you can see that it is successfully connected. Although my IP addresses are not valid, so it will go through. So if you come to NMCLI connection, show it is there. But if you're trying to bring back, let's say to bring up connection app ENS 303 and press enter, still there's a problem because one, the IP address is not valid. So if you had a valid IP address applied, then everything would be okay. So this is how you can do everything at once. This is how you can create the connection, you can adjust the connection, and you can have everything on board. So that is it. So let me just do delete. I don't want to have it. ENS 33 that. So clear. So if you come back and say show, there it is. Now the last part on this is the configuration. I want to show you how to configure what? How to configure host names. And configuration of host names. This is actually like a name representing a what? Representing a machine. We have a command called what? We have a command related to that called hostname CTL. Hostname CTL. This one is a utility used to manage the host names. If you want to change a host name from one to another, you can change that. If you want to use the IP addresses, for example, when it comes to host names, if I want to say ping 192.168.2.162, you see, yes, I am actually in a position to ping, but I am pinging it using an IP address. And yet I know that this operating system, I have a user called RHL. Can we use ping RHL, or can we use ping server? How do we change now? How do we connect the name to an IP address. So this is the work of what? This is the work of trying to understand the host names. So first of all, you need to operate as root. Sudo bash. Sudo is like a privileged, user. So you're trying to have or to acquire a privileged, the authority now to get into what? Into the actual account, exactly the root account. So I'll just put my password, Redhat. And okay, it means that I do not have the sudo bash. It's a Redhat. Okay, no problem. So just use su and then say Redhat. So now we are linked up to our what? We are linked up to to the sudo account, or we are linked up to the root account, or the administrator's account, or the system administrator's account. Now, when it comes to host name, if you have, let's say, -help, let's see, host name space -help. Let me see. You can see that I'm trying to seek some help on what? On the word host name. What is host name? So it will try to give me a lot of information here, but we have some options, some program options. We have some program options. For example, if you want to find the aliases, you can use -a. This one will give you the alias names. -f will give you the long host name. And then there is, so I want to concentrate on the -a and the -f. The rest can also give you, you see, for example, for the -s, this one always give you the short host name. Now here we have two things. We have something called the fully qualified domain name. And then we have the short name. So how do we view the short name? How do we view the fully qualified domain name? Okay, let me show you. Now, since we have this command called namectl, host namectl, just run, and it will display this. You can see that the static host name for my case is localhost.localdomain. This is what we are talking about, or what we are trying to achieve or try to understand. So host namectl, this will give you the name of your host, but you can always change. If you don't want to remain like localhost.localdomain, you can change even to something else. And this will give you a lot of information again. You can also talk about the kernel, which kernel are you using, the architecture, the operating system, the virtualization. So you can see the operating system here is what? Is Redhat Enterprise Linux 8. So let's concentrate on this part. How do we change the host namectl? First of all, what is the fully qualified domain name? Now, so in this case, you'll find that we are trying to, so here it means that we are trying to achieve what? The host name, trying to find out the host name. So if you want to find the, let's say, fully qualified host name, you can always run what? Host name space -f. And if you press enter, you can see that it is localhost. Now, if you use host name -a, press enter, you can see that we have a lot of info here. Now, -a is actually the fully qualified name because it gives you a lot of name, but F will only give you the short name. So we have the difference of host name. Remember, it is host name, not host name ctl -f. Host name, then -f. Host name -a. That is by using the program options. So how do we do this? For you to change that, we need to edit or to perform some edit on this particular file. Let's say etc, and then we have hosts. Let's see, we have hosts. This one, hosts. So if you want to initiate or add a host name of your choice, you can always do that. So if you press enter, you can see that this is an area where we have what? We have host names. This one is about an editor or an editor. So it's more like a text file. So if you open a text file, you can always do what? You can always use that. And then in this case, we can always do some adjustments on this particular file. So I don't want to do some adjustments right now, but I want first of all to take you through, because we will come into that. We will adjust that name. We also have something else, a configuration file that says the etc, and then we have resolve.conf. If I press enter, you can see that generated by network manager search, we have like isteducation.com, then name server is 192.168.2.250. So we can change the name server if we want. So what we are doing right now is what? I want us to see how can we change the host name? How can we change the host name? So changing the host names means what? It will require us to restart the network manager, because it's actually the network manager that does all this. So how do we do? So I will just go back to the file etc hosts, and then this time round, I will press I for insert, and then come down here. So we will come down here, and then I will attach the IP address. So I'll say 192.168. This one is now my valid address, 162. And then with this, I will now assign a what? I will now assign a name. And the name here is what? So I will start with the IP address and then followed by. So first of all, I need to have, let's say, fully qualified name. So I'm calling it like RHL. Now this is a short name. And then okay, fully qualified name, and then later we can come to what? We can come to the short name. You see? So here I have what? 192.168.2.162. The fully qualified name is what? RHL.local, and then the short name is RHL. Now let me save. So that is by escaping, then WQ, put exclamation and press enter. From there, we need to reload the network. So I'll just say restart the network manager. Restart network manager. Now, in this case now, if I come back and say, let's say host name CTL and press enter, now you can see that the transient host name is what? RHL.local, RHL.local. So the static will always remain as that. Nothing will not be in a position to change that. But because we have the configuration file, let's see. We have this configuration file. So you see, like, if we decide now to change this, let's say we're calling it I. Okay, let me remove this. So let's see, we are changing this. So let me call it like Kenya. And then let me call it here again, Kenya.local domain. Now let me save and see. Now, if you come back to network reload, because we have to restart the network, that's why UC Systems still restart network manager, and then come back here to on host name CTL, press enter. Now with this, you can see that we are not even changing that. The system knows that automatically that it's all about what? Local host, local domain. The only thing we can change is about the transient host name. So let me just go back and re-edit that again. Then so I'm bringing it as localhost, then taking that again to localhost. So WQ, yeah, so come to network manager, restart it, and then maintain now. hostname CTL, then we are coming back to that. Now, in this case, you'll find that changing the hostname sometimes gives you the option. And look at this, we have like RHL local. I don't know whether this one is going through. So I can say ping, let's say RHL dot local. Yeah, you can still see that I am in a position to do what? To ping. So this one is equals to what? This one is equals to this IP address 168.2.162. And still we are having a breakthrough on that. So if you want to change the hostname, you have to use what? Hostname CTL command for you to see everything on board. And then we have the configuration files now. That is the /etc/hosts. But again, if you want now to, let's say you want to get more of configurations now, because we can actually have, we also have this, let's say cat, let's see what is in there, etc host name. So this one automatically gives you that. That is a configuration file. You can also see etc resolve. This is also a configuration file. And then we also have cat etc hosts. This is also a configuration file. So when it comes to this now, we are in a position to manage the networks. And you can manage the network from this perspective, where you can talk about different platforms. And this is actually what happens when it comes to managing network in general, So up to there, I think we've actually talked a lot. And probably something else, I want to show you something else. For example, if you want to adjust, let's say /etc, and we also have system, is it system, or we have sysconfig, yeah, and then let's say we have like the network scripts, yeah, and then IFC, yeah, ENS 160. If you want to adjust something specific to that, to the network interface that we have, you can just use this configuration file and it will open more information about what? About your device. It will tell you that the type is Ethernet, proxy, none, browser, no. So everything lies. The name is EN60, the device is EN60, on boot, yes. So you can find a lot of info when it comes to this particular what? This particular configuration file. So this is specifically to what? To that that device, which is ENS 160. So up to there, I know that we've actually discussed a lot. And if you did not have any clue or any info about them, how to manage the network using NMCLI, connection, NMCLI, NMTUI, NM connection editor, just the same way we did on NMCLI, it's just the same way you can do using NMTUI and using NM connection editor. So you are free. And this should not be the end of this. I want you to probably do more research, read more on all those 3 methods of configuring the network as far as Linux operating system is concerned. Now, coming to the last part. Now, like a summary. So the TCP IP network model is a simplified 4-layered set of abstractions that describes how different protocols interoperate in order for computers to send traffic from one machine to another over the internet. So we are talking about the TCP IP. The TCP is the transmission control protocol or the internet protocol. That is the model. As long as you're using the IP addresses, that is, you are actually connected to the TCP kind of model. The IP version 4 is the primary network protocol used on the internet today. IP version 6 is intended as an eventual replacement for the IP version 4 network protocol. By default, Red Hat Enterprise Linux operates in dual stack mode, using both protocols in parallel. Then we have the network manager. It's a daemon that monitors and manages network configuration. NMCLI command is a command line tool for configuring network settings with the network manager, which is not only the tool or the only tool for configuring the network, but we also have the NMT UI. We also have the NM connection editor. Then the system's static host name is stored in the etc host name file. The hostname.ctl command is used to modify or view the status of the system's hostname and related settings. The hostname command displays or temporarily modifies the system's hostname. So up to there, this is like the summary or the general overview of what we've discussed, but I encourage you to dig more on this particular chapter. So up to there, we will meet in the next chapter, which is chapter 13. So thank you and see you in the next video.